Before we begin the story, let us know where you're watching from by leaving a comment below. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Have a wonderful day. Enjoy the story, everyone. Sophia Thompson's office smelled of aged wood and broken promises. Amelia walked through the frosted glass door, her footsteps echoing on the oak floor her grandfather had installed decades ago, when Thompson & Co. was still synonymous with integrity in Seattle's construction market. Now the walls were bare where award certificates once hung. The shelves displayed empty spaces where trophies used to gleam under the natural light streaming through the panoramic windows. Her father sat behind the desk, his shoulders hunched as if carrying the weight of every mistake he hadn't made. The scandal hadn't been his fault. A corrupt partner had embezzled funds and left the company drowning in millions of debt. But blame didn't matter when 50 families depended on paychecks that could no longer be paid. "Amelia, have a seat," Sophia said, his voice rough from sleepless nights. She pulled out the worn leather chair and sat down, folding her hands in her lap. At 28, Amelia Thompson was an environmental architect with a respectable portfolio and a growing reputation in sustainable construction projects. She'd worked on LEED-certified buildings, developed rainwater harvesting systems, and integrated vertical gardens into skyscrapers. Her dream had always been to transform cities into spaces that could breathe, that could coexist with nature instead of suffocating it. But dreams didn't pay debt. "I received a proposal," Sophia began, looking at his hands as if the words were too heavy to speak. "A proposal that could save everything. The company, the jobs, your grandfather's legacy." Amelia felt her heart race. From who? Victor Langford. The name dropped into the room like a stone thrown into still water. Victor Langford, urban development magnate, billionaire at 35, owner of Langford Enterprises, a company that transformed entire neighborhoods, that erected skyscrapers as if they were houses of cards and turned them into icons. He was legend and mystery. He appeared on business magazine covers, but rarely gave interviews. He kept his distance, reserved, almost untouchable. "What does he want?" Amelia asked. Her voice steady despite the internal turmoil. Sophia looked up, and for the first time in weeks, Amelia saw something beyond desperation in her father's eyes. There was also embarrassment. "He wants to marry you." The silence that followed was deafening. Amelia blinked, trying to process the words. "Marriage. Victor Langford." The two things didn't make sense together. "Explain," she said, her voice low but controlled. Sophia took a deep breath and opened a leather folder on the desk. Inside were documents printed on Langford Enterprises letterhead, clauses and numbers that danced before Amelia's eyes. "It's a marriage by contract. He needs a wife who understands sustainable architecture. Someone with real credentials. Not just a pretty name for social events. He's launching a new division of the company focused on ecological urban development and wants a partner who shares that vision." "And in exchange?" Amelia asked, her hands beginning to tremble slightly. "He pays off all our debts immediately and offers a partnership contract for future projects. We're talking about saving 50 families, Amelia." 50? Amelia closed her eyes. 50 families. Familiar faces flashed through her mind. Marco, the construction manager who had 3 young children. Lisa, the accountant who was paying for her mother's medical treatment. Nathan, the newly married engineer who had just bought his first house. "Why me?" she whispered. "There are hundreds of environmental architects out there because you have something he needs," Sophia replied. "Authenticity. You're not in this for the glamour or the money. You truly believe in what you do, and he knows it." Amelia opened her eyes and fixed her gaze on her father. "You're asking me to sell my life." "I'm asking you to consider a partnership," Sophia corrected, his voice gentle but firm. "This isn't about love, Amelia. It's about purpose. He doesn't want a fairy tale. He wants a professional and personal alliance. Someone by his side who understands what he's trying to build." Amelia stood and walked to the window. Outside, Seattle stretched beneath a gray sky, typical of October. Fine rain blurred the glass, creating patterns that looked like tears running down. She could see her distorted reflection. Brown hair pulled into a loose bun, tired green eyes, simple work clothes. "Does he want to meet me first?" she asked without turning around. "He proposed dinner tomorrow night at Canlis." Canlis, one of the city's most exclusive restaurants overlooking Lake Union, a place where billionaires close deals and sealed destinies. Amelia took a deep breath. The scent of rain entered through the window cracks. Mixing with the smell of old paper in the office, she thought of her grandfather, of the man who had built everything from scratch, who believed architecture was more than structures. It was about creating homes, communities, Futures. If I agree to this dinner, she said slowly, still looking out at the city. I'm not promising anything, I know, but I want you to understand something, Dad. Amelia finally turned, and her voice carried a new firmness. If I do this, it won't just be out of duty. It'll be because I chose to, because I believe I can make a difference. I won't accept being treated like merchandise. Sophia nodded, his eyes glistening. You're stronger than you think, Amelia. You always have been. That night, Amelia returned to her apartment in Capitol Hill. It was a small but cozy space with plants in the windows and shelves full of books about sustainable design. She made chamomile tea and sat on the worn sofa, holding the warm cup between her hands. Victor Langford. She opened her laptop and typed his name. Images appeared. A tall man with broad shoulders, dark hair combed back, eyes of an intense blue that seemed to penetrate through the screens. He was always in an impeccable suit, never smiled completely, just a half smile that suggested absolute control. There were articles about his projects, award-winning skyscrapers, planned communities that integrated green spaces, partnerships with environmental NGOs. But there was also mystery. He never talked about his personal life. There were no photos with women, no mention of relationships. It was as if he existed only to work, to build, to dominate. Who are you, Victor Langford? Amelia murmured at the screen. The next morning, she woke up to a message on her phone. Unknown number. Canlis. 7 p.m. M. Looking forward to meeting you, Amelia. VL. Short, direct, powerful. Amelia felt something strange in her stomach. It wasn't fear. It was curiosity, a spark of something she couldn't name. She spent the day at the office trying to focus on architectural plans. But her mind kept wandering. What would she say? How would she behave? Should she treat him as a possible business partner or as what, exactly? At 5:00 the afternoon, she went home and opened her closet. Most of her clothes were practical. Dress pants, simple blouses, comfortable shoes. She wasn't the type who attended gala events. But in the back, hanging and almost forgotten, there was a black dress she'd bought for her college graduation. Simple, elegant, with a cut that flattered her figure without being excessive. Amelia showered, left her hair down, falling over her shoulders, applied discreet makeup. When she looked at herself in the mirror, she saw not the tired architect, but a woman about to make a decision that would change everything. At 7 sharp, a black car was waiting in front of the building. The driver opened the door without a word. The drive to Canlis was silent. Amelia looked out the window, watching the city lights turn on as night fell. Her heart beat fast, but she kept her hands steady on her purse. When they arrived, the maitre d' received her with a discreet smile. Miss Thompson, Mr. Langford is expecting you. She followed through the elegant restaurant with its modernist decor and stunning view of the lake, and then she saw him. Victor Langford stood beside a private table near the windows. He wore an impeccable dark suit, no tie, the first button of his shirt open. His blue eyes found hers as soon as she entered, and for a moment the world seemed to slow down. He didn't smile. He just watched her, as if evaluating every detail, every movement. Amelia lifted her chin and walked toward him with firm steps. Mr. Langford, she said as she approached. Victor, he corrected, his voice deep and surprisingly smooth. You can call me Victor. After all, we're going to get married. Amelia felt a shiver run down her spine. Then let's be honest from the start, she responded, holding his gaze without wavering. For the first time, he smiled, and in that smile, Amelia saw something that deeply intrigued her. Danger, promise, and perhaps possibility. Victor pulled out the chair for Amelia with a gesture that seemed natural, almost chivalrous, but his eyes never left hers. It was as if he were reading every micro-expression, every hesitation, every thought she tried to hide. Amelia sat down, feeling the warmth of his hand brush lightly against her back for a fraction of a second. A touch so brief it could have been accidental, but that left her skin tingling. The restaurant around them was a whisper of low conversations, and silverware touching fine porcelain. The soft lighting created an intimate atmosphere. And through the panoramic windows, Seattle's lights twinkled like earthbound stars, reflected in the dark waters of Lake Union. The scent in the air was a sophisticated mix of red wine, spices, and something subtly woody. Perhaps from him. Thank you for coming, Victor said, sitting across from her. His voice had a hypnotic quality, deep and controlled, like someone used to commanding rooms full of executives with just a few words. I didn't have much choice, did I? Amelia responded, keeping her tone polite but direct. One corner of his mouth lifted. There's always a choice, Amelia. That's why we're here. The sommelier appeared with a bottle of French red wine that probably cost more than Amelia's monthly rent. Victor nodded, and the glasses were filled with a deep ruby liquid. Amelia picked up hers just to have something to focus on, besides those disturbingly attentive blue eyes. Your father told me you graduated at the top of your class in environmental architecture from MIT, Victor began, leaning back slightly in his chair, that you turned down offers from 3 of the country's biggest architecture firms to come back and work at the family company. You did your homework, Amelia observed. I always do. He took a sip of wine, his eyes still fixed on her. But I want to hear it from you. Why did you come back? Amelia swirled the glass between her fingers, watching the wine dance. Because my grandfather built that company with his own hands. Because architecture for me was never about erecting impressive structures. It's about creating spaces that respect the world around us. And he believed in that too. Past tense, Victor noted softly. He believed. He died 3 years ago, Amelia said, and for the first time that night, her voice carried an almost imperceptible fragility. Cancer. 6 months later, everything started falling apart. Victor nodded slowly. And now you're here considering marrying a stranger to save his legacy. And 50 families, Amelia added, raising her eyes to meet his redders. I'm not doing this just out of nostalgia, Mr. Langford. I'm doing it because real people depend on that company. Children who need food on the table. Parents who have bills to pay. I can't just let it all slip away without fighting. Something changed in Victor's expression. The calculating look softened for a moment, revealing something deeper, perhaps respect, perhaps recognition. Victor, he corrected again, and that's exactly why you're here. Because you fight. Because you truly care. The waiter brought the appetizers. Perfectly seared scallops over truffle cauliflower puree. The presentation was a work of art. But Amelia could barely think about food. Her stomach was tight with the enormity of the decision hanging over her. Explain the terms to me, she said, putting her fork down before even starting to eat. I want to understand exactly what you're proposing. Victor wiped his mouth with the napkin and leaned slightly forward. The proximity made Amelia's heart race, involuntarily. It's simple on paper, complicated in practice. He began, we get married in a binding legal agreement. I pay off all of Thompson & Co.'s debts. We're talking about $4, $2 million. On top of that, I offer a 5-year partnership contract for sustainable development projects. Your company would work together with Langford Enterprises on at least 6 major projects per year. Amelia felt the weight of the numbers. $4 million. 6 projects annually. It was more than salvation. It was an entirely new life. And what do you get? She asked. A wife. Victor answered without beating around the bush. Someone who shows up by my side at events, who understands my business vision, who can contribute intellectually to projects. I'm not looking for a porcelain doll, Amelia. I'm looking for a partner. For how long? 3 years. After that period, we can reevaluate or end the contract amicably. You talk like it's a corporate merger deal, Amelia said, unable to hide the sharpness in her voice. It is, Victor admitted, but I don't intend for it to be cold. There will be respect. There will be room for autonomy. You'll have your own bank account, your own wing in my house, your own professional life. I'm not a tyrant, Amelia. Then what are you? Why do this? You could have any woman you wanted. Victor was silent for a long moment. He looked out the window at the city lights, and when he spoke again, his voice carried something Amelia didn't expect. Vulnerability. Because I'm tired of women who want my money, my last name, my status. Because every time I try to have something real, I discover it's theater. I know this sounds cynical, but I prefer transactional honesty to romantic fakeness. Amelia studied his face. The subtle lines around his eyes that suggested sleepless nights, the strong jaw that conveyed determination, the way his fingers drummed lightly on the table, revealing an anxiety hidden beneath the facade of control. And if I say no? She asked softly. Then you say no, Victor responded, meeting her gaze again. I don't force anyone into anything, Amelia. But I need you to know, this is a one-time offer. There's no plan B, no negotiation. It's yes or no. The weight of the statement hung between them like a storm cloud. Amelia felt her chest tighten. Freedom or responsibility? Her dreams or the survival of 50 families, her life as it was, or a leap into the unknown with a man who was simultaneously transparent and enigmatic. Do you have children? Do you want them? She asked suddenly. Victor blinked, clearly not expecting the question. I don't. I haven't planned on it, but that would be negotiable if it were important to you. Do you expect intimacy? Amelia felt her face heat up as she asked the question. But she needed to know. Victor's eyes narrowed slightly, not with anger, but with something more intense. I expect us to be adults. If it happens naturally, great. If not, I won't force anything. But I won't lie and say I'm not attracted to you, Amelia. That would be dishonest. Her heart raced. The way he said it without frills, without games, was unsettling and strangely refreshing. I need time, she whispered. You have 48 hours, Victor said. After that, the offer expires. I have other projects waiting on decisions. Amelia nodded. The rest of dinner passed in a fog. They talked about architecture, about Victor's projects, about her vision for greener cities. She discovered he was incredibly intelligent, that he understood technical nuances most businessmen ignored. He truly listened to her, asking questions that showed genuine interest. When dessert arrived, a delicate chocolate soufflé that melted in the mouth, Victor leaned in again. Can I ask you one last question? He said. Go ahead. If there were no consequences, if it were just about you, what would you do? Amelia took a deep breath. The question was cruel in its simplicity because it exposed exactly the core of her dilemma. If there weren't 50 families depending on her, if there weren't her grandfather's legacy, if there were nothing but herself, I don't know, she admitted, and the honesty hurt. Victor nodded, as if he'd expected that answer. He stood and walked around the table, offering his hand to help her up. When she accepted, he pulled her gently closer, just enough for her to feel his warmth, then figure it out, he murmured, his voice low and intimate, because if you say yes, I want it to be for you, too, not just out of obligation. The driver took her back in silence. Amelia looked out the window, the city passing by like a blur of lights and shadows. When she got home, she didn't turn on the lights. She just sat in the dark, listening to the sound of her own breathing. 48 hours to decide the rest of her life. And somewhere in the shadows of her mind, part of her already knew the answer. Amelia spent the next 36 hours in a state of emotional suspension. She tried to work, review architectural projects, answer emails, but her mind always returned to that dinner, to Victor's deep voice, to the way he looked at her, as if he could see through all her carefully constructed defenses. On the morning of the second day, her phone buzzed. Another message from an unknown number. But she already knew who it was. Lunch today, my office, noon. I want to show you something. V. Amelia hesitated, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. This wasn't part of the agreement. He'd said 48 hours, not multiple meetings, but something inside her curiosity, perhaps, or that strange spark she'd felt at the restaurant made her respond. I'll be there. Langford Enterprises headquarters was in the heart of Seattle's financial district, a glass and steel skyscraper that reflected the clouds and seemed to touch the sky. Amelia entered the impressive lobby with its Italian marble floors and contemporary art installations that were probably worth more than all of Thompson & Co. The receptionist was expecting her. Miss Thompson, Mr. Langford is waiting for you on the 40th floor. The elevator rose silently, and with each passing floor, Amelia's heart beat faster. When the doors opened, she found herself in a spacious, bright area. Victor's executive office. He stood beside an entire wall of glass, his back to her, observing the city below. He wore dark dress pants and a white shirt, with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows, revealing strong forearms. There was something deeply attractive about the informality of that image. The billionaire without the full armor of a suit. Amelia, he said without turning, as if he'd sensed her presence. Thanks for coming. You didn't give me much choice with that message, she responded. Walking toward him, Victor turned, and the smile that curved his lips was genuine, almost amused. You always have a choice. You could have ignored it, but I didn't. No, you didn't. He studied her face for a long moment. Come. I want to show you something. He guided her to an adjacent conference room where a huge table was covered with architectural plans, miniature 3D models, and digital screens, showing building renderings. Amelia felt the air escape from her lungs. They were sustainable urban development projects, residential buildings with vertical gardens, commercial complexes with integrated solar energy systems, public squares designed to maximize green spaces. It was everything she dreamed of creating. This is, she began, but words failed her. Langford completed, positioning himself beside her, or at least what I want it to be, but I need someone who truly understands this, not just as an external consultant, but as part of the core vision. Amelia walked around the table, her fingers sliding over the plans. She could see the details. The attention to natural wind flows, the calculated solar orientation, the low environmental impact materials. Whoever had started this understood the fundamental principles. "Did you do this?" she asked. "Me and a team, but something's still missing." Victor moved closer, so close she could feel his warmth radiating. "It lacks soul. It lacks someone who believes in this not as a marketing strategy, but as a mission." Amelia turned to face him, and for the first time she saw Victor Langford not as the intimidating billionaire, but as a man passionate about something bigger than money. "Why is this important to you?" she asked softly. Victor looked away for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice carried a layer of emotion she hadn't heard before. "I grew up in a neighborhood where the air was gray from industrial pollution, where there were no parks, just concrete. My mother worked 16 hours a day to put food on the table, and even then we could barely pay rent." He paused, eyes fixed on the models. "When I managed to get out of there, I swore I'd build different things, spaces that people like my mother deserved, but never had." Amelia felt something tighten in her chest. She'd assumed Victor was just another billionaire obsessed with profit. But this was personal. This was real. "Then show me," she said impulsively. "Show me where you came from." Victor blinked, clearly surprised. "What? If I'm going to consider this, consider you. I want to know the man behind the empire. Not the Victor Langford from magazines, the real Victor." Something passed through his eyes. Vulnerability perhaps, or fear, but then he nodded slowly. "All right, let's go now." 20 minutes later, they were in a car. Not the elegant limousine, but a discreet SUV that Victor drove himself. Amelia sat in the passenger seat, watching him maneuver through Seattle streets with a familiarity that spoke of years navigating that city. They left the financial district and entered older neighborhoods where building facades showed decades of wear, where small local businesses still held out among corporate chains. Victor finally parked in front of a small Italian restaurant. Nothing fancy, just a modest storefront with a faded sign that read Gino's Trattoria. "My mother worked here," Victor said, turning off the engine, 3 shifts a week on top of another cleaning job. "I did homework at that corner table." He pointed through the window. "The owner, Gino, gave me food for free when he saw I was hungry." They entered, and the smell of sautéed garlic and homemade tomato sauce wrapped around Amelia like an embrace. The interior was cozy with red and white checkered tablecloths and old photos on the walls. An elderly man appeared from the kitchen, and when he saw Victor, his entire face lit up. "Victor, ragazzo." Gino opened his arms, and Victor hugged him with a genuine affection that made something melt inside Amelia. "Gino, this is Amelia," Victor said, placing his hand protectively on her back. "Bellissima," Gino exclaimed, kissing both of Amelia's cheeks. "Finally, you bring a ragazza. Sit, sit." They sat at the corner table, the same one where Victor had done homework decades ago, and Gino disappeared into the kitchen, returning moments later with plates of bruschetta, creamy risotto, and chicken parmesan that smelled heavenly. "He never let me pay," Victor murmured, but there was a genuine smile on his lips. "Because you already paid," Gino shouted from the kitchen. "You renovated my kitchen, remember? I don't accept your money, Testardo." Amelia laughed, and Victor rolled his eyes affectionately. As they ate, he told stories about nights studying for exams under the dim light of that corner, about the time Gino taught him to make marinara sauce from scratch, about how his mother used to sing while washing dishes. "Is she still?" Amelia asked delicately. "No. Cancer. 5 years ago." Victor's voice grew quieter. "But I was able to give her 3 years of comfort before that. A beautiful house, first-class treatment, trips she'd always dreamed of taking. It wasn't enough. But it was something." Amelia reached her hand across the table and covered his. Victor looked down, surprised, then turned his palm up and intertwined his fingers with hers. The touch was warm, solid, and sent an electric current up Amelia's arm. "You're more than you think you are," she said softly. Victor raised his eyes, and there was an intensity in them that made her hold her breath. "So are you, Amelia Thompson." They stayed like that for a moment that seemed to stretch forever. Hands intertwined, eyes locked on each other, the world around them disappearing. Amelia could hear her own heart beating in her ears, could feel Victor's pulse under her fingers. "Victor." She began, but he gently interrupted her. "You still have 12 hours, he said, "but I want you to know something. If you say yes, it won't just be a contract. Not for me. I'll respect the terms, but I'm going to treat you the way you deserve, with honor, with care. And if I say no," she whispered, Then I'll respect that, too. He squeezed her hand lightly. But I hope you don't. When Gino brought complimentary tiramisu, Amelia realized that something had changed inside her. She'd come to Seattle expecting to meet a cold, calculating billionaire. Instead, she'd found a man with scars, dreams, and a capacity for vulnerability he carefully hid from the world. Later, when Victor dropped her off at home, he got out of the car and opened the door for her. Seattle's fine rain was beginning to fall, creating halos around the streetlights. "Thank you," Amelia said, "for showing me that, for trusting me." Victor took a step closer, raising his hand to brush a strand of hair from her face. His fingers grazed her cheek, and Amelia had to force herself not to lean into the touch. "Until tomorrow, Amelia," he murmured, his voice husky. She nodded, not trusting her own voice. When he returned to the car and drove away, Amelia stood on the sidewalk, feeling the rain wet her face, mixing with something that could have been tears. 12 hours. And deep in her heart, she already knew the answer. Had nothing to do with duty or responsibility anymore. It had to do with the man who had just left, taking with him a piece of her that Amelia didn't know she was ready to give. Amelia didn't sleep that night. She lay in the dark, listening to the rain beat against the bedroom window, each drop seeming to mark the seconds, bringing her closer to the final decision. Her mind replayed every detail of the day on a loop. The way Victor had talked about his mother, the genuine affection in his embrace with Gino, the warmth of his hand enveloping hers. At 3:00 the morning, she gave up trying to sleep. She made strong coffee and sat by the window, watching Seattle, still asleep under the persistent rain. The apartment was silent, except for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the rhythmic drumming of drops. Her phone lit up the coffee table. Another message. "Can't sleep either. V." Amelia's heart raced. She looked at the screen for a long moment before responding. "How did you know?" "Because I can't either." "Meet me. I'll send you the address." Amelia should have thought twice. She should have been sensible, rational. But instead she put on jeans, a wool blouse, and a coat, grabbed her keys, and headed out into the rainy night. The address took her to a reconverted industrial area near the waterfront. Old warehouses transformed into lofts and creative spaces. She parked in front of a red brick building with large arched windows. Victor was waiting at the entrance, wearing dark jeans and a gray wool sweater. She'd never seen him so casual. "You actually came," he said, and there was something close to relief in his voice. "You asked." Amelia replied simply. He guided her inside the building and up a metal staircase that echoed with each step. On the top floor, he unlocked a heavy door and motioned for her to enter. Amelia held her breath. It was a huge open loft with high ceilings and exposed wooden beams, but that wasn't what stole her attention. It was the walls. Every inch was covered with architectural drawings, hand sketches, old plans yellowed by time, photos of constructions in progress. It was a visual archive of Victor's journey from youthful scribbles to multi-million-dollar projects. "This is my space," Victor said softly, closing the door behind them. "No one comes here. Not my team, not family. It's where I come when I need to remember why I started." Amelia walked slowly through the space, her eyes absorbing every detail. There was a framed child's drawing, a crooked building made with colored pencils signed Victor, age 8. Next to it, a faded photo of a smiling woman in a waitress uniform. His mother, Amelia presumed. "She believed in me when no one else did," Victor said, appearing beside Amelia. "I was 9 when I drew my first real building. She hung it on the fridge and said, 'One day, baby, you're going to build this, and it's going to be beautiful.'" "She was right," Amelia murmured. Victor walked to a large work table covered with recent projects. There was a half-empty bottle of whiskey and 2 glasses. He poured generous measures and offered one to Amelia. "I don't usually drink in the middle of the night," she said, "but accept it anyway." "Neither do I. But this isn't an ordinary night." He touched his glass to hers, and the crystalline sound echoed in the silent loft. The whiskey burned going down Amelia's throat, warming her from the inside. She sat on a high stool near the table, and Victor stood beside her close enough for her to feel his warmth on her skin. "Why did you bring me here?" she asked. "Really?" Victor was silent for a long moment, swirling the glass between his fingers. When he finally spoke, his voice was raw, stripped of its usual confidence. "Because if you're going to marry me, you need to know who I am when I'm not wearing the mask. Everyone sees the billionaire, the magnate, the man who never loses. But this," he gestured around, "this is me, the kid who grew up with nothing and is still afraid of waking up and finding out it was all a dream. Amelia felt something tighten in her chest. "You're afraid?" "Terrified," he admitted, turning to face her completely. "Of failing, of disappointing the people who depend on me, of becoming the kind of man who builds empires but loses his soul in the process." She reached out and touched his arm, feeling the tension in the muscles beneath the wool sweater. "You're not that man, Victor. How can you be sure? You barely know me." "Maybe I don't know all your secrets," Amelia said softly, "but I know this." She pointed to the walls, to the drawings and photos. "I know a man who keeps the drawing from when he was 8, who renovates the kitchen of a restaurant where his mother worked, who spends sleepless nights worrying about decisions that affect other people." Victor put his glass on the table and stepped forward, positioning himself between her legs as she remained seated on the stool. The proximity was intense, intimate. Amelia had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. "You scare me, Amelia Thompson," he confessed, his voice low and husky. "Why?" "Because you see me, really see me, and I've spent so long hiding who I am that I don't know what to do when someone looks through the walls." Amelia raised her hand and touched his face, her palm against the jaw rough from needing a shave. He closed his eyes for a moment, leaning slightly into the touch. "Maybe it's time to stop hiding," she whispered. When Victor opened his eyes again, there was something different in them. "A décision assurante." He raised his own hands and framed her face, his thumbs caressing her cheeks with a tenderness that contrasted with the intensity of his gaze. "If I kiss you now," he murmured so close she could feel his warm breath, "it won't be because of the contract. It won't be strategy or negotiation. It'll be because I can't pretend anymore that I don't want to." Amelia's heart was beating so hard, she was certain he could hear it. "Then don't pretend." Victor closed the small distance between them, and when his lips touched hers, it was as if the entire world caught fire. The kiss started soft, exploratory, soft lips moving against soft lips, breaths mingling, but then something broke between them, and the softness gave way to a hungry urgency. Victor's hands slid into her hair, fingers intertwining in the brown strands, tilting her head to deepen the kiss. Amelia gripped his shoulders, then slid her hands down his back. Feeling the tense muscles beneath the sweater, he pulled her closer, and she wrapped her legs around his waist, eliminating any space between their bodies. The world reduced to sensations: the taste of whiskey on his mouth, the woody scent of his cologne, the low sound he made when she gently bit his lower lip. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless. Victor rested his forehead against hers, eyes still closed, hands still holding her face as if she were something precious that could slip away. "My answer is yes," Amelia whispered. Victor opened his eyes, searching hers. "Are you sure?" "No," she admitted with brutal honesty. "I'm terrified, but I'm also sure that I want to try, not just for the company, not just for the families, but for this." She placed her hand over his heart, feeling the accelerated beats. "For you." Something passed across Victor's face: relief, joy, vulnerability, all at once. He pulled her into a tight embrace, burying his face in her neck, and Amelia felt his trembling breath against her skin. "I'll make this worth it," he promised against her ear. "I swear I will." They stayed like that for a long time, just holding each other in the middle of that loft full of dreams and memories. The rain continued beating against the windows, and Seattle slept outside, unaware of the promise being made in that sacred space. Eventually, Victor pulled back enough to look into her eyes. "Do you want to know more about me? About where I came from?" Amelia nodded, and he took her by the hand through the loft, showing her every corner. He told stories about each project on the walls, the failures, the victories, the lessons learned. He showed her an old worn notebook full of teenage sketches, notes about structures and dreams written in young, hopeful handwriting. "I wanted to build a better world," he said, flipping through the yellowed pages. "It sounds naive now, but it was true then, still is." "It's not naive," Amelia insisted. "It's necessary." When the sky began to lighten, tinting itself with pearl gray tones through the high windows, they were sitting on the floor, leaning against a wall, their bodies close but not touching, just sharing the space in comfortable silence. "When?" Amelia asked softly. "The wedding?" Victor turned his head to look at her. "Whenever you want, a week, a month, 6 months, 2 weeks. She decided impulsively, enough time to organize something simple, but not so much that I lose my nerve. Victor smiled, not the controlled half-smile he showed the world, but a genuine warm smile that transformed his entire face. 2 weeks then. He drove her home when the sun actually began to rise, painting Seattle golden through the scattered clouds. When he stopped in front of her building, Victor held Amelia's hand before she could get out. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" "For saying yes. For seeing me. For being brave." Amelia squeezed his hand. "Thank you for showing me who you are." And when she finally entered her apartment, exhausted but strangely energized, there was a message waiting. "Missing you already. Get some sleep. We'll need our energy for what's ahead. V." Amelia smiled at the screen, her heart light for the first time in months. 2 weeks. And then her life would change forever. But for the first time, she wasn't just resigned to it. She was surprisingly hopeful. The 2 weeks passed like a whirlwind. Meetings with lawyers, signing contracts, delicate conversations with Amelia's father, who oscillated between relief and guilt. Victor kept every promise. The debts were paid off, partnership contracts signed, and Thompson & Co. breathed again. 50 families could sleep in peace, knowing their jobs were secure. The wedding was organized with elegant discretion. No big parties or hundreds of guests, just an intimate ceremony in a historic chapel overlooking Puget Sound, followed by a dinner for 20 close people. Amelia's father, some work colleagues, Gino and his wife, and a few of Victor's trusted executives. Amelia chose a simple ivory silk dress that flowed like water over her body without a veil or exaggerations. Her hair was loose in natural waves, with just a few white flowers woven through. When she entered the chapel to the soft sound of a cello, it was Victor's gaze that kept her walking. He stood at the altar, impeccable in a charcoal gray suit, but it was his eyes that held her, that intense blue fixed on her with a mixture of reverence and something deeper, more dangerous. She saw his lips move silently, forming a word, beautiful. The ceremony was short but meaningful. When the moment came for vows, Victor held her hands firmly. "Amelia," he began, his voice steady but charged with emotion, "I promise to respect you, listen to you, and see you. I promise to build with you, not just buildings, but a life worth living. I promise to honor your courage and never take for granted the sacrifice you've made for so many." Amelia felt her eyes burn, but kept her voice steady when it was her turn. "Victor, I promise to be your partner in everything, in dreams and in fears. I promise to challenge you when necessary and support you always. I promise that this, whatever it is, will be real, not just paper, but something we build together day by day." When the officiant said, "You may kiss the bride," Victor stepped forward and framed her face with his hands, his thumbs caressing her cheeks before leaning in and capturing her lips in a kiss that was both tender and promising. The small group of guests applauded, but Amelia barely heard. All that existed was his taste, his warmth, the silent promise being sealed between them. Dinner passed in a fog of polite conversations, sincere toasts, and stolen glances between her and Victor. He kept his hand on her knee under the table, his thumb drawing distracted circles that sent waves of heat up her leg. Every time their eyes met, there was growing tension, an anticipation that made the air between them feel electrically charged. When they finally said goodbye to the guests, Victor guided Amelia to the car, but instead of driving back to the city, he took the coastal road heading north. "Where are we going?" Amelia asked, watching Seattle's lights disappear in the rearview mirror. "A place just for us," Victor responded, intertwining his fingers with hers over the center console. "At least for tonight." 40 minutes later, they arrived at an isolated beach house built of wood and glass, practically hanging over the ocean. The waves beat gently on the rocky shore below, and the full moon painted a silver path over the dark waters. Victor got out and opened the door for Amelia, but instead of simply helping her down, he picked her up in his arms. "Victor!" she exclaimed, laughing as she held onto his neck. "Tradition," he murmured with that half-smile, "and I like some traditions." He carried her through the front door, and Amelia held her breath. The interior was stunning, completely open with glass walls facing the ocean, light wood floors, and minimalist but warm decor. And everywhere, on every surface, in every corner, there were candles, hundreds of them, creating a sea of flickering golden light. Victor set her gently on her feet, but kept his arms around her waist. "Do you like it?" "It's perfect," Amelia whispered, barely able to process the beauty around her. He guided her further inside, where a bottle of champagne rested in an ice bucket beside a tray with strawberries and chocolate. Victor poured 2 glasses, and they moved to the glass-enclosed deck, where the sound of the ocean enveloped them. "To us," Victor said, raising his glass. "To us," Amelia echoed, and they drank, eyes fixed on each other over the rims of their glasses. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable, but full of tension. The acute awareness that they were now husband and wife, that the night stretched ahead of them full of unspoken possibilities. Victor set his glass aside and took a step toward her. Amelia felt her heart race, but didn't back away. He raised his hand and gently removed the flowers from her hair one by one, letting them fall to the floor like white snow. His fingers brushed her scalp, sending shivers down her spine. "Amelia," he said, his voice husky and low, charged with something that made every nerve in her body come alive. "Yes." He leaned in, his lips grazing the shell of her ear, and whispered the words she'd only heard in the story's title, but that now spoken in that deep, intimate voice took on a completely new weight. "I'm going to destroy you in bed." Amelia gasped softly, her entire body shivering. Before she could respond, he continued, still whispering against the sensitive skin of her neck, "But not the way you think." He pulled back enough to look into her eyes, and what she saw there was pure intensity, desire, and something deeper, care, tenderness. "I'm going to learn your body, Amelia. I'm going to discover what makes you tremble, and I'll never forget." Her legs almost gave out. She gripped his arms to steady herself, and Victor pulled her closer, eliminating any space between their bodies. "Tell me you want this," he asked, his voice rough, "because if you don't, we stop now. No judgment, no pressure." Amelia looked into his blue eyes, saw the sincerity mixed with desire, and knew the choice was completely hers. And in that moment, with the sound of the ocean in the background and candlelight dancing around them, she knew exactly what she wanted. "I want this," she whispered. "I want you, Victor." Something dark and hungry passed through his eyes. He leaned in and kissed her, not soft like in the chapel, but deep, consuming, as if he wanted to devour every breath of hers. His hand slid down her back, finding the dress zipper and lowering it slowly, his fingers tracing a path of fire down her exposed spine. Amelia let her hands wander over his broad shoulders down his chest, unbuttoning his shirt with trembling fingers. When she finally managed to open the fabric, she spread her palms over his warm skin, feeling the tense muscles beneath her touch. Victor stepped back, pulling her by the hand toward the bedroom. The bed was huge, covered with immaculate white sheets, and more candles were scattered around, creating a dreamlike atmosphere. He stopped beside the bed and framed her face again, his thumbs caressing her cheeks. "Show me who you are, Amelia," he murmured. "No masks, no fear." She nodded and let the dress slip completely down her body, standing before him only in delicate lace lingerie. Victor inhaled deeply, his eyes traveling over every curve as if memorizing. "You're beautiful," he said with reverence. "So beautiful it hurts to look." Amelia felt her face heat up, but didn't look away. Instead, she reached out and finished unbuttoning his shirt, pushing the fabric over his shoulders and letting it fall. Her hands explored his chest, descending over his defined abdomen, feeling him contract under her touch. Victor picked her up and laid her gently on the bed, following right after. He propped himself on one elbow, looking at her for a long moment before leaning in and kissing her neck, then her collarbone, her shoulder. Each kiss was a promise, each touch a gentle claim. "You're mine now," he whispered against her skin, his hands exploring, learning completely. Amelia arched against him, fingers intertwined in his hair, pulling him closer. "And you're mine," she responded, her voice husky. The kisses intensified, deepened. Remaining clothes were removed, skin met, and the world reduced to ragged breaths, low moans, and the sound of waves crashing outside. Victor moved over her, supporting his weight on his forearms, eyes searching hers. "Are you sure?" he asked one last time. "Absolutely." Amelia responded and pulled him down. When they finally joined, it was with a reverent slowness that made Amelia's eyes burn. Victor moved carefully, attentively, watching every reaction of hers, adjusting, learning. Amelia held on to him, legs wrapped around his waist, feeling every movement, every shared breath. It wasn't just physical, it was emotional, vulnerable, deep. It was two human beings connecting in a way that transcended the body and touched something more essential. When they finally reached climax together, it was with each other's names on their lips. Bodies trembling, minds exploding in colors and sensations. Afterward, they lay intertwined, sweaty and breathless, heartbeats gradually slowing to something close to normal. Victor pulled the sheet over them and held Amelia against his chest, fingers tracing lazy patterns on her shoulder. "Are you okay?" he murmured against her hair. "Better than okay," Amelia responded honestly. She felt his smile against the top of her head. "Me, too." They fell asleep like that, lulled by the sound of the ocean and each other's warmth, knowing that something had changed irrevocably between them. It was no longer just a contract. It was the beginning of something real, frightening, and completely inevitable. Amelia woke to soft morning light, filtering through translucent curtains, painting the room in tones of pale gold and blue-gray. For a moment, she was disoriented. The mattress was softer than hers. The sheets had a different scent, clean and slightly woody. Then the memory of the previous night returned like a warm wave, and she felt her face heat up. She was alone in bed. Amelia sat up, pulling the sheet around her naked body, and looked around. The beach house was silent except for the constant murmur of waves outside. Then she saw it. A note on the nightstand, written in firm, masculine handwriting on a simple card, "Coffee on the terrace. No rush. We've got nowhere to be except here. Yours, Victor." She smiled, her heart doing something strange in her chest. Yours, Victor. Two words that carried a weight that went beyond the contract, beyond rationality. Amelia found one of Victor's shirts hanging on the chair, probably left there on purpose, and put it on. The fabric smelled like him. That mixture of cedar and something indefinable that was just Victor. The shirt came to mid-thigh, and she buttoned just enough to be decent. She followed the smell of fresh coffee to the outdoor deck, and what she saw made her stop in the doorway. Victor was sitting in a wicker armchair facing the ocean. He wore only gray sweatpants, his bare chest bronzed by the morning light. His hair was slightly tousled. A version of him the corporate world never saw. There was a small table beside him with a French press, 2 cups, fresh croissants, and cut fruit. As if sensing her presence, Victor turned his head. When he saw her wearing his shirt, something passed across his face: possessiveness, satisfaction, tenderness, all mixed together. "Good morning, Mrs. Langford," he said, and the title sounded strange and wonderful at the same time. "Good morning." Amelia responded, walking toward him. Victor extended his hand, and when she accepted it, he pulled her to sit on his lap. Amelia exclaimed in surprise, but settled against his chest, feeling the warmth of his skin and the steady beats of his heart. "Sleep well?" he asked, his lips grazing her temple. "Better than well," she admitted, intertwining her fingers with his, "like I haven't slept in years." He squeezed her hand lightly. "Coffee?" She nodded, and he reached for the cup, filling it with the dark, aromatic liquid. Amelia drank slowly, savoring the rich taste while watching the waves break on the rocky shore below. The sky was painted in shades of light blue and soft pink, lazy clouds floating on the horizon. "It's so peaceful here," she murmured, "like the rest of the world doesn't exist." "That's what I thought when I bought this place," Victor said. "A refuge. Somewhere I could just be." Amelia turned slightly to look at him. "Do you come here often?" "I used to come alone when things got too heavy, but I've never brought anyone here until now." He held her chin gently, tilting her face up. "You're the first." Something tightened in Amelia's chest. The intimacy of that moment, not sexual, but emotional, was almost overwhelming. She leaned in and kissed him softly, just a brush of lips that was more gratitude than passion. When they separated, Victor smiled, that genuine smile that transformed his entire face. "Hungry?" "Starving," she admitted. They ate slowly, sharing the croissants, feeding each other pieces of strawberry, and talking about small things, favorite books, songs that made them cry, places they dreamed of visiting. It was surprising how, despite everything happening so fast, talking to Victor felt natural, easy. "Tell me about your grandfather," Victor asked eventually, leaning back in the chair with Amelia still on his lap, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her arm. Amelia was quiet for a moment, organizing her thoughts. "He was the most honorable person I've ever known. Never cut corners, never compromised his values. When other builders used cheap materials or paid bribes to speed up permits, he refused. He said every building he constructed carried his name, and his name meant something." "Sounds like you were close." "We were. My mother died when I was 10. Cancer like yours. My dad kind of shut down after that. It was my grandfather who really raised me. He taught me to draw architectural plans, took me to construction sites on weekends, showed me how a building was born from nothing." Amelia smiled at the memory. "He used to say architecture was like poetry in 3 dimensions. He was right." Victor kissed the top of her head. "And he'd be proud of what you've become." Amelia felt her eyes burn. "I hope so." They stayed like that for a long time, just holding each other, listening to the ocean. Eventually, Victor moved, standing up with Amelia still in his arms. "Victor," she laughed, "you don't need to carry me everywhere." "I know," he said with that half smile. but I like it." He took her back inside, but instead of going to the bedroom, he stopped in the spacious living room with its glass walls and panoramic view. He set Amelia on her feet and went to a discreet sound system, pressing some buttons. Soft music began to play, something instrumental, piano and cello, intertwined in a melancholy but beautiful melody. Victor returned to Amelia and offered his hand. "Dance with me." She blinked, surprised. "Here? Now? Why not?" Amelia placed her hand in his and he pulled her close. One hand on her waist, the other holding hers. They began to move slowly, swaying more than actually dancing, bare feet whispering over the wooden floor. Amelia rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady heartbeat. "I didn't know you danced." "I don't," Victor admitted. "But with you, I want to try." She lifted her head to look at him. "Victor Langford, you're surprisingly romantic." "Don't tell anyone," he murmured, his eyes gleaming with humor. "It would ruin my reputation as a heartless billionaire. Your secret's safe with me." They continued dancing, and gradually the movement became less about dancing and more about closeness. Victor tilted his head and captured her lips in a slow, deep kiss that made Amelia's knees weaken. His hand slid down her back, up under the shirt she was wearing his, and found bare skin. Amelia gasped against his mouth, and Victor deepened the kiss, walking backward until his back met the glass wall. "You wear my shirt better than I do," he murmured against her lips. "You're not wearing a shirt at all," Amelia pointed out, her hands exploring his bare chest. "Exactly." He smiled against her mouth, then gently spun her, pressing her back against the glass. The contrast between the cold surface and the heat of his body made her shiver. Victor kissed her again. Neck, collarbone, the valley between her breasts over the shirt fabric. His hands unbuttoned the buttons slowly, revealing her skin inch by inch, kissing each newly exposed space. "Victor," Amelia sighed, fingers intertwined in his hair. "Tell me what you want," he murmured against her skin. "You," she responded without hesitation. "Just you." He picked her up again, and this time carried her to the bedroom. Sunlight now flooded the space, different from the candlelit atmosphere of the previous night, but no less intimate. Victor laid her on the bed, carefully covering her body with his. This time there was no urgency, just slow and deliberate exploration. He kissed every scar, every birthmark, every inch of skin, as if memorizing. "You're so beautiful," he whispered, his eyes traveling over her face, inside and out. Amelia felt tears prick her eyes, not from sadness, but from something deeper, more frightening. She was beginning to feel things she shouldn't feel so soon, things that went far beyond physical attraction or convenient partnership. When they joined again, it was with reverent slowness. Victor moved as if he had all the time in the world, watching every expression on her face, adjusting, learning what made her sigh, what made her moan. "Look at me," he asked when she closed her eyes, lost in sensations. Amelia obeyed, and what she saw in those blue eyes left her breathless. It wasn't just desire, it was connection, vulnerability, and something dangerously close to love. She couldn't think about that yet. It was too soon, too fast. But when they reached the peak together, each other's names on their lips, bodies trembling in unison, Amelia knew she was lost. Completely, irrevocably lost in this man who was supposed to be just a business arrangement. Afterward, they lay intertwined, sweaty and satisfied. Victor pulled the sheet over them and held Amelia against his chest, chin resting on top of her head. "Stay with me," he murmured, half asleep. "Just one more day before we go back to reality." "Yes," Amelia whispered, snuggling closer. "Let's stay." And as they fell asleep again, lulled by the sound of the ocean and each other's warmth, neither of them said out loud what both were beginning to feel, that this, whatever it was becoming much more than they'd planned. And maybe, just maybe, that was exactly what they both needed. They spent that entire day suspended in a bubble outside of time. Victor made breakfast, slightly burned pancakes that made them laugh, scrambled eggs that turned out perfect, and crispy bacon they ate straight from the pan. Amelia discovered that watching Victor Langford, billionaire magnate, cook barefoot in sweatpants, was one of the most charming things she'd ever seen. "I didn't know you cooked," she said, sitting on the kitchen counter still wearing his shirt. "I learned out of necessity," Victor responded, flipping the pancakes with a spatula. "When you grow up with a mother working 3 jobs, you learn early not to starve." "Did she teach you?" On weekends, when she had the energy, he smiled at the memory. She said, A man who can't cook will never be truly independent. She was right, as always. After breakfast, they walked along the beach. The sand was cold under their bare feet, and the wind carried the salty smell of the sea. Victor held Amelia's hand, fingers intertwined, and they walked in comfortable silence, just watching the waves and listening to the seagulls. "Tell me about your fears," Amelia said suddenly, stopping to look at him. Victor blinked, clearly not expecting the question. "My fears? Yes, everyone has them. I want to know yours." He was quiet for a long moment, looking at the horizon where the sky met the sea. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, almost carried away by the wind. "I'm afraid of becoming irrelevant, of building an empire, and discovering that in the end it meant nothing, that people only cared about what I could give them, not who I was." He turned to her. "I'm afraid of waking up one day and realizing I lived an entire life without really living." Amelia squeezed his hand. "You're not irrelevant, Victor. And what you build matters, not just the buildings, but the lives they touch." "What about you?" he asked. "What are your fears?" Amelia took a deep breath, the cold air filling her lungs. "I'm afraid of not being enough, that no matter how hard I try, I'll never reach what my grandfather built. I'm afraid of disappointing the people who depend on me." She paused. "And I'm afraid of losing myself in someone and forgetting who I am." Victor pulled her closer, wrapping her in his arms. "You're more than enough, Amelia, and I promise I'll never let you lose yourself. I'll always remind you of who you are." They stood like that, embraced against the wind, and Amelia felt something release inside her, a tension she'd been carrying for years since her grandfather's death, since she took on the weight of the company, since she began believing she had to be strong alone. Maybe, just maybe, she didn't need to be strong alone anymore. In the afternoon, they found a small coastal town a few miles away. It was a quaint place with antique shops, a bakery that smelled of fresh bread, and a cozy cafe with sidewalk tables. They walked in wearing simple clothes. Victor in jeans and a sweater, Amelia in borrowed sweatpants and one of his shirts, and no one recognized them. They were just another couple enjoying the day. "This is strange," Amelia said, taking a sip of cappuccino. "What is? Being invisible? No one looks at you as Victor Langford, billionaire. You're just Victor." He smiled. "It's liberating, isn't it? Sometimes I think about what it would be like to live like this all the time. Anonymous, normal, but you wouldn't really like it," Amelia observed, "because then you couldn't build the things you dream of. You couldn't make the difference you want to make." Victor tilted his head, studying her. "You understand me better than most people who've known me for years. Maybe because I'm actually paying attention." They explored the little shops, and Victor insisted on buying Amelia a small silver necklace with a leaf-shaped pendant. "Simple but beautiful. For the environmental architect," he said, fastening the necklace around her neck. His fingers brushed the nape of her neck, sending shivers down her spine. "Something for you to remember this day." "As if I could forget," Amelia murmured, touching the pendant. When they returned to the beach house, the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in dramatic shades of orange, training pink and purple. Victor lit the fireplace in the living room, and they settled on the large sofa. Amelia nestled between his legs, her back resting against his chest. "Tell me something no one knows about you," Victor said, his fingers playing absent-mindedly with her hair. Amelia thought for a moment. "When my mother died, I stopped talking for 3 months, literally didn't say a word. The doctors thought it was psychological trauma, but actually, I just didn't have anything left to say. It was my grandfather who got me to talk again." "How?" "He took me to a construction site and gave me a hard hat, said he needed my help deciding where to put the windows. He asked questions about natural light, ventilation, views, and eventually, I started answering. Little by little, the words came back." She smiled at the memory. "He saved me in so many ways." Victor kissed the top of her head. "And now?" "And now?" Amelia turned to look at him. "I think I'm being saved again, in a different way." But still, his eyes softened. "You don't need to be saved, Amelia. You're the strongest person I know. Strength doesn't mean we don't need help sometimes." "No," he agreed. "It doesn't." They had dinner on the deck, a simple meal of pasta, with pesto that Victor improvised, accompanied by red wine and laughter. Conversation flowed easily, moving from serious topics to silliness, from dreams to inside jokes that were already beginning to form between them. When night fell completely, transforming the ocean into a dark expanse, dotted only by the moon's reflection, they went back to the bedroom. But this time there was no sexual urgency, just the desire to be close, to touch, to connect. Victor lay on his back, and Amelia snuggled beside him, her head resting on his shoulder. One leg intertwined with his, he traced lazy patterns on her back, and she drew invisible circles on his chest. "Thank you," she whispered in the dark. "For what? For this day? For showing me who you are, for making this," she gestured vaguely, "easier than I thought it would be." Victor turned on his side to face her, even in the dim light. "Amelia, I need to tell you something." The serious tone made her heart race. "What?" "When I proposed this marriage, I thought it would be purely transactional, a mutually beneficial partnership. Nothing more." He paused, his hand finding her face in the dark. "But these last few days with you, I wasn't prepared for this." "For you?" Amelia felt her throat tighten. "Victor, no, let me finish." It took a deep breath. "I'm falling in love with you. I know it's early. I know it's intense. And I don't expect you to feel the same, but I needed you to know because I don't want this to be pretend. I can't pretend anymore that it's just business." Amelia felt hot tears slide down her temples. She raised her hand and touched his face, feeling the strong jaw under her fingertips. "Me, too," she confessed, her voice trembling. "I'm terrified, because it wasn't supposed to be like this, but it is, and I don't know how to stop." "Then don't stop," Victor whispered, leaning in to kiss her. "Let's just feel, see where this takes us." The kiss was salty with her tears, sweet with his promise, and when it deepened, becoming something more, it was different from the other times. It was slow, reverent, each touch carrying not just desire, but raw and honest emotion. They made love slowly, eyes fixed on each other, even in the dark, breath synchronized, bodies moving in perfect harmony. And when they reached climax together, it was with whispers of unspoken promises of imaginable futures, of frightening and beautiful possibilities. Afterward, as Amelia fell asleep in Victor's arms, she heard him murmur against her hair, "You're my person, Amelia Langford. I think you always were. I just didn't know I was looking for you." And even half asleep, she smiled because deep down she felt the same way. The next morning they had to return to Seattle. Reality was waiting for them. Work meetings, responsibilities, the world that existed beyond that perfect bubble. But as they drove back, hands intertwined over the console, both knew that something fundamental had changed. They were no longer two strangers bound by a contract. They were two people falling uncontrollably for each other. And despite the fear, despite the uncertainty, neither of them wanted to stop the fall. Victor's penthouse in the heart of Seattle was as impressive as Amelia had imagined, occupying the top 2 floors of a skyscraper with glass walls offering 360 degrees views of the city, modern but warm decor, and spacious areas that seemed designed for someone who valued both functionality and beauty. "Welcome home," Victor said, carrying their suitcases inside. He'd insisted that Amelia move in immediately. There was no reason to keep 2 apartments when they were married. Amelia walked through the space, her fingers sliding over surfaces of marble and light wood. Everything was impeccable, almost intimidatingly perfect. "It's beautiful, Victor. It's ours now," he corrected, coming up behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. "Everything is ours." They spent the rest of the day organizing Amelia's things, and Victor made a point of clearing out half the closet for her, emptying drawers, creating space. It was surprisingly domestic, and Amelia discovered she liked this version of Victor. The man who folded clothes carefully and seriously discussed which side of the bed she preferred. "Left," she decided. "I've always slept on the left side." "Perfect. I'm a right-side guy." He smiled. "We were made for each other." But the bubble of happiness was abruptly popped. The next morning, Amelia was making coffee in the state-of-the-art kitchen, still trying to figure out how the Italian espresso machine worked when she heard the front door open. She frowned. Victor was in the home office on a video conference. "Victor, honey, are you here?" A female voice echoed through the apartment, shrill and imperious. Amelia came out of the kitchen and found a woman standing in the living room. She was striking, tall, slender, with perfectly straightened blonde hair, dressed in an expensive tailored suit and very high heels. Her eyes, a pale and icy blue, fixed on Amelia with a mixture of surprise and disdain. "Who are you?" the woman asked, her voice cutting. "I'm Amelia," she responded, staying calm despite her racing heart. "Amelia Langford, Victor's wife." The woman's eyes widened, then narrowed dangerously. "Wife? This is a joke, right? Veronica." Victor's voice sounded behind Amelia, firm and cold. "What are you doing here?" Amelia turned and saw Victor standing in the office doorway, his jaw tense, his eyes hard in a way she'd never seen before. The woman, Veronica, apparently, crossed her arms. I figured the rumor was a lie. But here she is. The mysterious wife no one knew anything about until you showed up with a marriage certificate. She looked Amelia up and down, evaluative and cruel. Environmental architect from a bankrupt company. How convenient. Amelia felt her blood freeze. The way Veronica said it, loaded with accusation and venom, turned her motives into something sordid. Watch what you're about to say, Victor warned, his voice low and dangerous as he walked to stand beside Amelia, his hand automatically finding her back in a protective gesture. Why do I have to pretend this is a fairy tale? Veronica laughed, the sound bitter. Please, Victor, you secretly marry a woman who has everything to gain financially. And I'm supposed to believe it's true love. You don't know anything about this, Victor said through clenched teeth. I know enough. Veronica focused on Amelia again, and there was pure malice in her eyes. How many millions did he pay for you to wear that ring? How much did it cost to buy a wife who could decorate his projects and make him look progressive? Amelia felt the words like slaps, each one hurt because it touched exactly on her worst fears that people would see the marriage this way, as a cold transaction, as opportunism on her part. Veronica, leave now. Victor took a step forward, positioning himself partially in front of Amelia. No, Amelia said softly, touching Victor's arm. She stepped forward, facing Veronica directly. Her hands were trembling, but she kept her voice steady. You can think I'm a gold digger. You can think whatever you want about me, but I married your brother to save 50 families, not for the money. I married him because I believe in what he's trying to build, and because I saw in him something you apparently can't see. A decent man who deserves to be loved for who he is, not for what he has. Veronica blinked, clearly not expecting resistance. You don't know him. Maybe I don't know everything, Amelia interrupted, her voice gaining strength, but I know enough to know he's worth it. And if he wants someone who will just obey him and smile pretty for photos, you're right. That's not me. It never will be. But that's between me and him, not between me and you. The silence that followed was dense, charged. Veronica opened her mouth, closed it, then looked at Victor. You're really going to let her talk to me like that? She can talk to you however she wants. Victor responded calmly, but there was steel in his voice, especially when you invade my home, uninvited, and attack my wife. By the way, how did you get in? I have a key. Victor extended his hand. Give it back. Veronica looked at her brother with something close to shock. Victor, the key. Veronica. Now, she hesitated, then took a key off her key ring with jerky movements and threw it into Victor's hand. So that's it. You choose a stranger over your own family. I choose my wife, Victor said simply, and I choose respect. Something you clearly don't have for me since you assumed I'm not capable of making my own decisions. Mom and Dad are going to freak when they find out. They already know. I called them yesterday. Victor crossed his arms, and they reacted with a lot more class than you. That seemed to hit Veronica like a punch. Her face paled, then turned red. You told them first. I'm your sister, and you're acting like a spoiled child. Victor sighed, and for the first time, there was weariness in his voice. Veronica, I love you. You're my sister, but I won't accept you coming here and disrespecting Amelia. If you can't treat my wife with a minimum of decency, then you're not welcome in my home. Amelia saw something pass across Veronica's face. Pain, anger, maybe even fear. For a moment, she looked vulnerable, young, lost. Then the mask of arrogance returned. You're going to regret this, she said, but her voice faltered slightly. When she leaves you and takes half of everything, you're going to regret it. She left, her heels clicking hard on the marble floor, and the door closed with a thud that echoed through the apartment. The silence that remained was deafening. Amelia felt her legs go weak. She walked to the sofa and sat down heavily, her hands trembling. All the confrontation, all the adrenaline, was leaving her system at once. Victor knelt in front of her immediately, his hands on her knees. Amelia, look at me. She raised her eyes and was surprised to realize there were tears in them. I'm sorry, Victor said, his voice soft. I'm sorry you had to go through that. Veronica, she's complicated, always has been, but that's no excuse. She's your sister, Amelia whispered. I don't want to cause problems between you. You didn't cause anything. She chose to behave that way. Victor held Amelia's face, his thumbs wiping away the tears that were beginning to fall. Listen, you were incredible. The way you stood up for yourself. how you didn't back down. I'm so proud of you. I don't feel incredible, Amelia admitted, her voice breaking. I feel questioned, like everything she said could be true. It's not. Victor moved to sit beside her, pulling her into his arms. Nothing she said is true. You're not an opportunist. You're not using me. And anyone who really gets to know you will know that. Amelia buried her face in his chest, allowing herself to be vulnerable, allowing herself to feel the weight of those venomous words. Victor held her tight, one hand stroking her hair, murmuring low reassurances. She's going to tell everyone, Amelia said eventually, pulling back enough to look at him, about how we got married. She'll twist the story. Let her tell it. Victor wiped another tear from her face. The truth always comes out eventually. And in the meantime, we know what's real between us. That's what matters. What if your family hates me? They won't. He kissed her forehead. My parents already want to meet you properly. I set up a dinner for this weekend. And as for Veronica, she'll calm down eventually. Or she won't. Either way, it doesn't change anything between us. Amelia wanted to believe him, wanted to believe they could weather any storm together. But a small part of her, the part that Veronica had hit with surgical precision, whispered doubts. As if sensing her thoughts, Victor tilted her head up, forcing eye contact. Hey, we're going to be fine. I promise. Amelia nodded but couldn't find words. Later that night, when they were lying in bed, Amelia couldn't sleep. She lay staring at the ceiling, listening to Victor's deep breathing beside her. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. A message from an unknown number. He always protects his things until he doesn't anymore. Ask him about the last one. Amelia felt her stomach turn. She looked at Victor sleeping beside her, his face relaxed, vulnerable in sleep. Who was the last one? And why did that message make her feel like the ground was opening up beneath her feet? Amelia didn't mention the message to Victor the next morning. He woke up early, kissed her gently, and left for an important meeting with investors. She was left alone in the huge penthouse, the anonymous message burning in her mind like a live ember. Ask him about the last one. She tried to distract herself. She answered emails from Thompson & Co., reviewed architectural plans, even tried to read a book, but the words didn't make sense. Her concentration destroyed by the insidious doubt that Veronica had planted and that mysterious message had watered. At 2:00 the afternoon, she couldn't take it anymore. She grabbed the car keys Victor had given her, a discreet but luxurious Tesla, and drove without a clear destination, just needing to get out of that apartment full of unanswered questions. She ended up stopping at a small cafe in Capitol Hill near where she used to live. She ordered a cappuccino and sat in a corner, watching people pass by the window. Normal life, normal problems. She envied that simplicity. Amelia. She looked up and found her father standing beside the table, surprised. Sophia Thompson looked better than he had in recent weeks, his shoulders not so hunched, his face less marked by worry. Dad. Hi. She gestured to the empty chair. Sit. Sophia sat down, studying his daughter's face with the attention of someone who'd known her forever. What happened? What makes you think something happened? I know that look. Your mother had the same one when she was mulling something over. He touched her hand on the table. Talk to me. And then, to her own surprise, Amelia talked. She told him about Veronica, about the accusations, about the anonymous message. The words came out in a rush, months of tension and doubt. Finally finding an outlet, when she finished, Sophia was quiet for a long moment. Do you love him? He finally asked. The question caught Amelia off guard. Yes, I think so. But it's all so confusing, Dad. It happened so fast. How can I trust these feelings? How do I know it's not just gratitude or Stockholm Syndrome or Amelia? Sophia squeezed her hand. When I met your mother, we got married 3 months later. Everyone said it was crazy, that it was too fast. But we had 20 wonderful years before the cancer, and none of them were wasted. His eyes grew distant with the memory. Love doesn't have a timeline. Sometimes you just know, but what if I'm wrong? What if Veronica's right and he? Then you deal with it when it happens. But don't let the fear of possible future wounds steal present joy. He tilted his head. You stood up for yourself when she attacked. That's not the behavior of someone who's just benefiting from an arrangement. That's the behavior of someone protecting something real. Amelia felt tears prick her eyes. I'm so scared, Dad. I know, but fear is the price we pay for loving. And it's worth it, my daughter. Always worth it. When Amelia returned to the penthouse a few hours later, Victor was already home. He was in the living room, standing by the windows, looking at the city. There was something tense in his posture. Victor. He turned, and the relief that passed across his face was palpable. "Where were you?" "I tried calling 3 times. Sorry. It was on silent. I went for coffee with my dad." Amelia set her purse aside. "Did something happen?" Victor ran his hand through his hair, a gesture she'd already learned meant frustration. "Veronica's spreading rumors. She called half the people we know, saying our marriage is a sham, that you're with me for the money." Amelia felt her stomach sink. "Victor, no. Let me finish." He walked to her, holding her shoulders. "I called my parents. I told them everything. The terms of the contract, the reasons, how it started, everything." Amelia's heart stopped. And my mother wants to meet you. We're having dinner with them tomorrow." He paused. "But I also told them something else." "What?" Victor held her face, his blue eyes intense and serious. "I told them the contract doesn't matter anymore, that I started this as business, but now it's real, that I'm falling in love with my wife, and if they don't accept you, they'll lose me, too." Amelia felt her legs go weak. "Victor, you can't alienate your family because of me. It's not because of you. It's because of us." He lowered his head until their foreheads touched. "Amelia, I won't accept a life where you're not respected, where they treat you like you're not worthy of being by my side. Because the truth is the opposite. I'm the one who doesn't know if I'm worthy of you." "Don't say that," she whispered, her hands rising to hold his wrists. "It's true. You sacrificed your freedom to save people who didn't even know me. You face criticism and accusations with your head held high. You see me, the real me, and you don't run." His voice grew husky. "I love you, Amelia. Completely, desperately, and I know it's early. I know I should take it slow, but I can't. Not with you." The tears Amelia had been holding back all day finally fell. "I love you too," she confessed, her voice breaking, "and I'm terrified because it wasn't supposed to be like this. It was supposed to be simple, contractual. But I love you so much it hurts." Victor pulled her into a crushing embrace, and she buried her face in his chest, allowing herself to cry from relief, from fear, from overwhelming love. "Then let's try," he murmured against her hair. "Together, without fear, just us." She nodded against his chest, holding him as if he were the only solid thing in a world spinning too fast. Eventually, he guided her to the sofa, and they sat intertwined. Victor wiped the tears from her face with his thumbs. "There's something else," he said. "Something I need to tell you about the last one." Amelia froze. "How do you know about Veronica sent you a message, didn't she?" "Anonymous, but I know it was her." He sighed. "Rachel, that was her name. We met 3 years ago, dated for 8 months. I thought maybe it was real, but I found out she was selling information about my business to competitors. Everything was calculated. Every kiss, every I love you. Everything." Amelia felt her heart squeeze at the pain in his eyes. "It was after that I decided never to let anyone close enough to hurt me again, that I decided if I needed a partner, it would be on honest terms. No pretending." He held Amelia's hand. "But then you showed up and you tore down all my defenses without even trying." "I'm sorry she hurt you," Amelia said softly. "Me, too. But you know what? Now I'm grateful, because if I hadn't gone through that, maybe I never would have found you this way. Maybe I never would have taken this chance." Amelia leaned in and kissed him. Soft, sweet, full of silent promises. "Tomorrow," she said, when they separated, "we're meeting your parents tomorrow, and we're going to show everyone this is real." Together, that night they made love slowly, each touch a confession, each kiss a promise, and when they finally fell asleep, intertwined and exhausted, both felt they had crossed some invisible threshold. The contract didn't matter anymore. They had chosen each other freely, completely, and nothing, not venomous family, not painful pasts, not whispered doubts would change that. For the first time since everything began, Amelia slept peacefully, knowing that regardless of what came, they would face it together, and that, she realized, was the kind of strength no contract could guarantee. It was the kind of strength only true love could create. 2 weeks had passed since the dinner with Victor's parents, a meeting that surprisingly had been warm and welcoming. Margaret Langford, an elegant woman with gray hair and kind eyes, had embraced Amelia as if she were a long-awaited daughter. Robert Langford, reserved but affectionate, had shared stories about Victor as a child that made him blush and Amelia laugh until her stomach hurt. Even Veronica had shown up at the end of the dinner, embarrassed and visibly uncomfortable, to apologize. "I was wrong," she'd admitted, avoiding Amelia's gaze, "and I'm sorry." It wasn't a complete reconciliation, but it was a start. Now Amelia stood in front of a red brick building in a revitalized area of Seattle, her heart beating fast with anticipation. Victor was beside her, his fingers intertwined with hers. "Ready?" he asked, smiling. More than ready. They entered the building and went up to the third floor. When Victor opened the double glass door, Amelia held her breath. A spacious, bright area stretched before them. High ceilings, enormous windows flooding everything with natural light, reclaimed wood floors, exposed brick walls that told decades of history. But what really captured her attention was the elegant sign mounted on the reception wall, Ashford Thompson Sustainable Architecture. Her name first in large, proud letters. "Victor," she whispered, her voice failing. He wrapped his arms around her waist from behind, chin resting on her shoulder. "It was your vision that made this possible. Your name comes first." Amelia felt hot tears slide down her cheeks. She walked through the space, her fingers touching new drafting tables, state-of-the-art computers, shelves waiting to be filled with books and architectural models. There was even a small kitchen with a professional coffee machine and a cozy break area. "The team starts next week," Victor said, following her. 5 architects, 2 environmental engineers, an interior designer specializing in sustainability, and you as creative director. Your decision, your vision. Amelia turned to face him. "How did you do all this in 2 weeks?" "When you love someone, you move mountains." He shrugged as if it was simple. "And it may have helped that I have connections and, well, money." She laughed through the tears. "You're impossible. Impossible not to love." He smiled that smile that always completely disarmed her. Exactly that. They explored every corner of the new office. Victor showed every plan detail. The solar energy system integrated into the roof, the recyclable materials used in the renovation, even the plants already strategically positioned to improve air quality. "And there's one more thing," Victor said, guiding her to a door in the rick's back. When he opened it, it revealed a private office with a view of the city. On the door, a gold plaque, Amelia Ashford Langford, Creative Director. Inside, there was a beautiful wooden desk, a comfortable ergonomic chair, and on the wall, carefully framed, were Amelia's grandfather's drawings, old projects her father must have given to Victor. In the center, a photo, Amelia, at 12 years old, wearing an oversized hard hat next to her grandfather at a construction site, both smiling. Amelia broke down. She sat in the new chair and cried from joy, from gratitude, from overflowing love. Victor knelt in front of her, holding her hands, letting her feel everything without trying to fix it or rush her. "Thank you," she finally managed to say. "For this, for believing in me, for making my dreams bigger than I imagined. You deserve this, and so much more." He kissed her fingers. "And we're going to build incredible things together. Not just buildings, but a future." That afternoon, they visited the new company's first project, a residential complex planned for middle-income families with community gardens, rainwater harvesting systems, solar panels, and generous green spaces. Amelia spent hours reviewing the plans, taking notes, suggesting changes that Victor accepted with genuine enthusiasm. "You're brilliant," he said, while watching Amelia redesign a natural ventilation system. "Seriously, it's sexy watching you work like this." She laughed, blushing. "Sexy? I'm literally talking about airflow." "Exactly." He pulled her by the waist, kissing her neck. "Passion is always sexy, no matter the subject." When the sun began to set, painting Seattle in shades of gold and pink, they returned to the penthouse. But instead of going inside, Victor took Amelia to the private terrace on top of the building, a space she had barely explored. There, under the darkening sky, was a table set with candles, fresh flowers, and a complete meal waiting. "When did you have time to?" "I have my resources." Victor pulled out the chair for her with that gesture that had become a ritual between them. "I wanted to celebrate our new office, our new life, us." They ate slowly, talking about everything and nothing. Future projects, places they wanted to visit, silly things that made them laugh. The city lit up around them, millions of lives being lived. And they were just 2 human beings in that moment, in love and happy. When they finished dessert, a tiramisu that rivaled Gino's, Victor stood and offered his hand. "Dance with me." Amelia smiled, remembering that morning at the beach house that felt like an eternity, and at the same time, just yesterday. Always. There was no music this time, just the sound of the city, distant horns, wind at the heights, the constant murmur of urban life. But they danced anyway, swaying gently, bodies pressed together, hearts beating in sync. "Amelia Ashford Langford," Victor murmured against her hair. "I love you deeply, desperately. The kind that changes who you are at the most fundamental level." He pulled back enough to look into her eyes. "And I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving to you that you made the right choice." Amelia held his face, her thumbs caressing his cheeks. "I love you too, Victor Langford, and you don't need to prove anything. You just need to keep being exactly who you are." They kissed under Seattle's starry sky, the city witness to a promise being renewed. Not the promise of a cold contract, but the promise of two hearts that chose each other against all odds. When they finally went back inside, intertwined and laughing at some inside joke, Amelia stopped at the door and looked back at the view, at the table still lit by candles, at everything this new chapter represented. "Are you okay?" Victor asked, following her gaze. "More than okay." She turned and held his hand. "I'm home." And she was, not in the luxury apartment, not in the city, but in Victor, in them, in the space they had created together, where vulnerability was strength, where honesty was the foundation, where love was the brick and mortar of everything they built. That night, as they made love slowly, and then fell asleep, intertwined, both knew that what began as a pragmatic transaction had transformed into something rare and precious, a true partnership, a deep love, a shared future. 3 months ago, Amelia Thompson was about to lose everything. Now Amelia Ashford Langford had everything she never knew she needed. And beside the man she had learned to love with all his fears, scars, and impossible dreams, she was ready to build not just buildings that touched the sky, but a life worth living together, always together. What Amelia and Victor discovered wasn't taught in any business manual or legal contract. They learned that true love isn't born from perfect circumstances, but from courageous choices. That vulnerability isn't weakness. It's the bridge that connects two souls. That sometimes the best stories begin in the most unlikely places with the most practical reasons, but blossom into something extraordinary when two hearts decide to be honest. Amelia entered that agreement to save a company. She left it having found a home, not in glass walls or elegant offices, but in the arms of a man who saw her, truly saw her, and chose to love her every day. And maybe that's the most important lesson. True love isn't found. It's built brick by brick, choice by choice, day by day. What about you? When was the last time you chose to be brave with your heart?